Pink Floyd began the post-Barrett era with a soundtrack. Now, the soundtrack was not something that they were unfamiliar with, as they had contributed for many soundtracks before this. However, this one was different, considering instead of just being a contributor, they were responsible for the full body of the score and the songs that were embedded within this soundtrack. Now, the soundtrack, or should I say the film in which they were doing the soundtrack for, was entitled More, which is a 1969 English film that was all about finding yourself, finding a girl, and heroin. Yeah, that one came out of left field, didn't it? Yeah, it's a very interesting little piece. It's all about a guy who decides that he wants to find himself. He ends up meeting a girl, he gets kind of close to the girl. They go to Paris. They end up robbing some dude and finding some guy named Mr. Wolf. And then she exposes him to heroin, and bad things occur. His life spirals out of control. Bada bing, bada boom. It's kind of a play on the tale of Daedalus and Icarus, where the female lead, Estelle, I believe her name was, is supposed to represent the sun. Where if you stay too close to something which you warned about, or either that or something that is dangerous for you, then your wings will melt and you will spiral and fall. So it's kind of a unique little take on it. It was released in the summer of 1969, and well, it's no surprise it's about heroin. It's 1969. Do you guys remember 1969? Bet you a lot of you don't. Because a lot of you were just a twinkle in your father's eye. Actually, a lot of your fathers were just twinkles in your grandfather's eyes. Wow, that shows just how young some of you are and how old I am. That sucks. Anyways, back to the soundtrack. Soundtrack is a very interesting little escapade. This is one that is primarily written by Roger Waters, which became a staple throughout the remainder of Pink Floyd's classic era up until his departure after the final cut. However, it's David Gilmour that actually provides 100% of the lead vocals on this album, which is interesting because that happened in the post-Barrett era, and it also happened, of course, in the post-Waters era with a momentary lapse of reason. Now, a lot of classic Barrettists will kind of be a little disappointed with this album, obviously, because Barrett was just... With The Piper at the Gates of Dawn and Saucer Full of Secrets with the Barrett material, I mean, he's just on his own fucking planet. No, he's in his own fucking solar system, alright? His music's over here, his thoughts are over here, his brain's some star over here, and the comet that's going by here, probably is his penis. I don't know. I really don't know. But yeah, this was a man whom it was very difficult for the band to follow his musical ideas because he himself couldn't follow his own musical ideas. He was changing them up and everything like that. So this could be considered to be a little bit of stability, but at the same time, the band was kind of reacting to doing this on their own. As a result, More contains some of Pink Floyd's heaviest material. The Nile song doesn't even sound like Pink Floyd. You listen to the Nile song and you think that you're listening to somebody completely different. You think that there's an error on your disc, and you think that perhaps the Pandora radio station that you are listening to is just trying to fuck with you. Yeah. Then there are songs such as the Crying Song or Symbolique. That's going to remind you of bands such as the Beatles or Porcupine Tree. I'm kind of going past and present here with that. A little comparison there with the Beatles. The song reminds me a little bit of Across the Universe, and then Symbolique reminds me a lot of Porcupine Tree's current and some of the past material from like the 90s onward, where it's got a little bit of heaviness to it, but it still has that light, that brisk side that's just very, very nice. And you can kind of understand why so many people compare Pink Floyd and Porcupine Tree, or Porcupine Tree and Pink Floyd. Whatever. It's one of those weird little things that you kind of pick up whenever you really sit down and study it. And this one wasn't all that hard to study. It was one that I heard almost instantaneously. And maybe that's just because I love Porcupine Tree and Pink Floyd. I don't know. Now, for this film, the filmmaker wanted them to do something. These are not supposed to be songs, or it's not supposed to be a score in the conventional sense. Instead, this is supposed to be songs that the main characters would hear, whether it be on the television or on the radio, or this would be something that they would hear while in a restaurant or in a town square or someplace that would be playing music. So essentially, the body of this movie, the dialogue, the story, the motion, that was supposed to really drive the film. The music was not supposed to drive the film, add any sort of emotional value to it whatsoever. It was supposed to merely exist to be media that is played whenever they are in some sort of transportation device, whether they're at home watching the television or out in a public place. So, good luck, right? Well, Pink Floyd actually did this rather well. And surprisingly for a soundtrack, it sold very well. This is a soundtrack that actually hit 157 on the top 200 charts in the United States. Did a lot better in England, obviously, because they're an England product. Now, you have to understand, folks, that might not seem like anything. It might seem like paltry numbers, especially in the Billboard era back then, where everything was a little bit, better and everything like that. But this isn't, Twilight breaking crap. It's not, The Bodyguard or, For the Love of the Dick or something like that. It's not some name brand movie that's going to sell very, very well. The soundtrack, that is, because of the name of the movie and the artists that are on the movie. This is one band that's doing this, so you have to understand that's kind of a very different thing right there. So it did very well. However, right now, in today's world, in the world of Pink Floyd, it's a very forgotten album, and it's an album that a lot of people need to discover, and if they've already known about it, they need to rediscover it. Because this is an album that contains a lot of uniqueness. It's kind of an album that reminds me of what their past is, as I mentioned it earlier, but also kind of gave me a token look, a crystal ball peering into their future. And I'm not talking the future of like Dark Side of the Moon and albums like that. I'm talking the near future. We're talking metal, we're talking Ummagumma, and we are talking Atom Heart Mother. Because it seems like a lot of the ideas incorporated on this album were transferred over into the following sessions, with the only exception being that there was a great deal more in the way of contribution from all members. In fact, a couple of those albums that we will get to, you'll notice that each and every member opted to create their own piece. So, very, very unique overall, and suited the film very, very well. Strange, though. These are all songs that you would never consider on a Pink Floyd soundtrack or, a playlist for your own. Instead, you're going to be, getting all the favorite songs from the 1970s era material while maybe throwing in 3 or 4 from, here and there, and that's about it. You're going to exclude songs like the Nile song, like the Crying song, like Cymbalia, like Ibiza Bar, things like that, because, let's face it, to a lot of people, this is an album that is completely and totally unknown. But here's the thing. You would probably have a better time having a wildebeest come in your eye than forgetting to put a couple of these songs on your compilation, because these are essential pieces of Pink Floyd history. This is a very, very important album for them because it's their first step after the full departure of Syd Barrett. Even though he had left during the middle of the Saucerful of Secrets sessions, this is the first time in which the band was to create an album completely devoid of Syd Barrett in their lives, and that is a big step which was eventually going to take Pink Floyd and ascend them to stardom. Speaking of, the 1970s are coming. Pink Floyd's arguably being considered one of the best bands of the 1970s. It's time to get started with that 70s era material and see how it all began. Because the band was about to embark upon their most successful but also their most tumultuous time in their career. And we're going to discuss all of those albums in depth, completely, very personally.